we're never ever going to have those things here.
Thank you. Thank you.
You don't ban dogs because a dog takes a dump on a pavement. It's not the dog's fault.
I think end it all right there.
On that note. Mark's here. Mark, say hi to the camera.
Hi to the camera.
Just in case anyone hasn't seen you in our previous videos, Mark, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Mark Schaffer. I work for PET, also known as Personal Electric Transport, and we do unicycles and wheels and scooters and e-bikes and all sorts of things PLEV.
Mark, thanks for joining us.
Jack, that's okay.
We'll now do the less humble version of Mark's intro, and I'll say that Mark is probably one of the top 5 most knowledgeable people about micro-mobility anywhere in the world right now. If you need to have a conversation about legalisation, what should and shouldn't be going on, how to go about it, this is the guy.
Mark, you sent over a video to us the other day from the House of Parliament doing an e-scooter debate, and quite frankly, some of the things that these lords have to say are questionable, to say the least.
And quite frankly, it made me want to bash my own head in, to be honest with you. So demoralising. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll attach the link to this very video in the description of our video. We may not be able to show you the footage that we're watching in this video today for copyrighty legal reasons, but we'll figure out some clever, elegant, definitely legal solution to that.
Shall we press play?
I think
Let's go for it.
Let's just dive in.
Yeah, why not?
If any of you have a point to make, just tap the space bar and unleash hell.
Sure.
Okay.
E-scooters, as I understand, are currently illegal in London. So how is it that e-scooters are currently terrorising our streets and pavements at this time?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I know exactly where this is going.
all right, so right there, I mean, the level of inflammatory language is worrying to me, and what we'll see throughout this footage is member of the House of Lords after member of the House of Lords with relatively weak arguments in sort of like, you know, lobbing sort of word bombs at e-scooter riders and the community in general to try and make the best of a weak argument. But you know, as soon as people sort of resort to effectively name calling, then you know they're probably on thin ice. But there you go. So with that in mind,
I mean, I rode an e-scooter into work this morning. And I didn't terrorise one person.
No,
I didn't shout at anyone. I had trousers on. Like, it was all very above board.
yeah, I kind of would say the same for all of us. I don't really see ourselves as.
I think
I'm not that
terrorise.
scary. I don't know.
No,
you know,
I mean,
you
terrorise
can.
is such a strong word, isn't it? You know, they're really talking about the extremes here, and for most people using an electric scooter, it is, you know, the day in day out commutes, getting people from home to work. You know, terrorising is it's too much.
Look, I think what's happening in a lot of this debate is they're kind of conflating the technology with antisocial behaviour, and none of us will ever condone people riding irresponsibly, sort of riding on pavements, not being polite.
Yeah.
Whether you're on a bicycle, whether you're a pedestrian yourself. I mean, you know, you bowl along the pavement and sort of push little old ladies out of the way. That's antisocial behaviour. You don't ban walking because you're walking irresponsibly.
Riding a scooter dangerously is to be discouraged, just like
Completely.
riding a bicycle dangerously or driving dangerously. Like, you made a great point to me the other day. We're getting ahead of ourselves. There's so much more of this
There
to
is
be
a lot
angry
more.
about. But you made a great point to me the other day about you can legally drive a 200 mile an hour Lamborghini down a 30 mile an hour street. No one's looking at it being like, well, those Lamborghinis are way too dangerous. Well, only if you break the law and use it irresponsibly.
I think that's going to be the general theme here, is that it's not the scooter, it's the rider, and we should encourage people with good regulation and sensible policing to encourage behaviour that fits in with everybody and isn't antisocial. It's that simple.
Particularly those vulnerable, older pedestrians, young families and disabled, as well as sight-impaired using pavements. The most recent statistics I have seen apparently include pedal bikes, covering e-bikes, as well as e-scooters. In 2019, 379 pedestrians were hit by pedal cyclists, of which 4 were killed, 122 were seriously injured.
So
Okay.
Is that a really bad stat?
So, obvious point, this report covers pedal cycles and is primarily about pedal cycles. It's in 2019. Now, the numbers of e-scooters on the road in 2019 were minimal. Mm-hmm. So, without seeing the figures, and she's not presenting the data, I would guess that maybe none or significantly few of those incidents were related to e-scooters anyway. However, look, people dying on the roads is a terrible, terrible thing. And unfortunately, there are statistics, grim statistics, whether it's bus versus pedestrian, truck versus pedestrian, car versus pedestrian. By far, the most minimal is bicycle versus pedestrian. It's almost trace, Interestingly enough, the figure that she mentions here was worse in 2018 and in 2017. It's actually reduced, which kind of makes her argument null and void.
So the stats are better from 2019 than from 2018 or 2017. Apparently, that's really interesting.
Do you reckon that's down to improved cycle infrastructure?
Well, you'd hope so, but I don't think the difference is statistically enough to kind of really start making conclusions at this stage. Yeah. Ultimately, you've got to cross relate that to how many bicycles are on the road. I'm imagining that in 2020 there's a lot more cyclists on the road and e-scooters, so the numbers are going to go up. I'd assume.
Yeah.
And we've all talked about this before. We need to invest in infrastructure. There's no point pushing people onto bicycles or even e-scooters if it's not safe to do so. And that's always been the argument in London, especially with Emily Hartledge and that tragic accident. It wasn't the scooter; it was bad design, bad infrastructure. It was dodgy potholes, dodgy manhole covers. You can't blame the technology. You at some point you have to say, well, we need to invest in people's safety and we need to invest in infrastructure.
The question to my noble friend is, what is the current framework for enforcement? Who is monitoring the use of e-scooters to ensure that these are limited to private land, outside London, and what penalties are imposed for their illegal use? Noble lady, my noble friend indeed, highlights the intricacies of the number of different micro-mobility interventions that we currently have, and e-scooters are all but one of them. And she is absolutely right that the private use of e-scooters is indeed illegal. A person can be fined up to £300, get 6 points on their license, their e-scooter can be impounded.
Okay, she's saying that's a good thing, and she's, I totally appreciate, the position she's in this debate. And ultimately what happens again and again is each questioner is making the point, okay, well, why aren't people being arrested and hung, drawn and quartered, and what exactly is the punishment if you're riding an e-scooter? And then she's saying, well, yes, private ones are completely illegal and we're going to put 6 points on their driving licence and we're going to fine them £300 and we're going to impound their e-scooter, charge them £150 a day. And it's like, well, really? Is that proportional, to attack the working poor for simply trying to get to their shift on time? Is that okay? Why are you saying that a corporation can rent you a scooter at £1 a minute, or okay, it's slightly better than that, but it does kind of mount up. You'll find that you'll get through £10 pretty quickly if you're riding a ride-sharing scooter.
And also as well, when you have to take out a rental scooter, you need to firstly be in the right area. You need to live in a certain area where those trials are going on. It's so particular where these trials are and how they're available to people. It's no wonder that people are buying their own personal scooters because it's cheaper, it's way easier. Yes, it's against the law, but as you've said before, people vote with their feet and you just see scooters everywhere now.
People are just trying to get to work. They're not terrorising anyone, they're not miscreants. They're simply just trying to get to work on time, especially when there's a global pandemic, by the way, that makes it a little bit dangerous to go on the bus or tube. Guess what? We've got a viable solution here. So I'm not really sure that fining them out of existence and putting points on their driving licence is particularly fair to working men and women in the country.
You can't help but feel that there's something quite powerful about the fact that so many otherwise entirely law-abiding citizens are consciously breaking this one particular law because they've had a go on the scooters and they've gone, this is so much better that I'm going to risk that fine and those points and having this scooter taken off me because in the meantime it's improved my life so significantly.
Well, that's what we found at PET. I mean, when we started out, as we said in the past, the market was kind of sustainability geeks, people who wanted to clean up the environment, and obviously that's a great thing to achieve, and micromobility is a massive component in that. But what we're finding actually over the last couple of years is that demographic has shifted to working men and women just trying to get to work on time.
Yeah.
That's our marketplace at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, anyway,
Let's do
Press
it.
the big button.
Barely a day passes when I'm not passed in my wheelchair on the way to the house by someone riding an e-scooter on the pavement.
So this guy's interesting. So he's a disabilities campaigner, and he makes a very valid point.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's like, well, they're visually impaired, they're disabled on wheelchairs, and they're having to negotiate lots of people riding on pavements on their e-scooter.
Not good.
Not good.
Yeah,
so
not good.
so question: why are people riding on e-scooters
On the pavement.
pavement?
Yeah.
Right. And the reason is, well, partially that if you are caught riding an e-scooter on the pavement, you might get fined £30 or you might get let off. If you're caught riding an e-scooter on the road or on a cycle lane, being responsible with a helmet, with your lights on, you're risking your scooter being impounded, a £300 fine and 6 points on your
So
license.
those really harsh fines are all for road
use.
using
And
scooters.
if you're on the pavement, they can't do that to you. So
I didn't actually know that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a thing?
That's a thing.
Wow.
So guess what people are doing?
That's infuriating.
It's really, really infuriating. And the other reason that people ride on pavements, especially out of London, is people don't feel safe
Yeah.
because the cycling infrastructure is so rubbish.
Yeah.
And it's not just e-scooter riders, it's cyclists too.
Yeah.
Because they're scared of riding on the road.
Yeah.
100%, because the roads are so such an inhospitable environment for.
That's a good word.
any kind of
Inhospitable to life.
Micro, I tried.
Yes.
Micro mobility. And also, I'll go one further. I think another reason that a lot of people are riding on the pavement and they don't feel safe on the road is because they're riding quite cheap, not very well made scooters. And I think a large part of the reason that people are riding cheap, not very well made scooters is because they're afraid of spending a lot of money on something that might get taken away from them.
That's true. So the answer, look, as far as we're concerned at PET, it's an obvious answer to this. If you swap those regulations around, so if you're caught riding on the pavement, there's a pretty heavy on-the-spot fine. So there's no argument. You're caught red-handed. Sorry, 200 quid please, or we'll get your scooter off you. Right? Mm-hmm. Then I think that would pretty sharpish kind of get people off the pavements, and then perhaps replace it with an amnesty. If you're riding responsibly on cycle infrastructure on minor roads at the speed limit, then okay, it's technically against the law until we get our act together, or actually get an act through Parliament. But right now, we understand that the situation is just transitional, and let's have an amnesty. Let's allow people to use e-scooters responsibly and safely on the roads. If they ride them irresponsibly, antisocially, there's an on-the-spot fine. It will sort this out overnight.
And by the way, while you're at it, you can apply all of that to cyclists.
Of course.
Yeah,
Why not?
absolutely.
Just unify
micromobility,
it.
e-bikes, absolutely everything. Just say, look, ride these responsibly. Use the cycle infrastructure. Use minor roads. Don't be a and people will warm to that.
And also just a thing to go back to as well, you're talking about the cheaper electric scooters that are being ridden on the pavements because they're not safe. This all kind of funnels back into the whole point, working class people are buying these electric scooters to get around, and all they can afford because of the pricing right now are these cheap scooters. So that, the more that they're rolled out, the more regulation there is, the more scooters that can come through, that can be priced better, and then it's just a safer world for everyone, really.
Well, this is it. I think the point about if you go to automotive, I mean, technically one of the safest cars in the world is a Porsche 911. Driven at the speed limit, it will brake in a shorter distance. It's more agile. It's more capable of getting out of trouble.
Roll.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But obviously, if it's used irresponsibly, not the case. But people generally don't use them irresponsibly, and it's the same with any technology. You get like a more expensive scooter that can stop quicker, it's got suspension, it's got more traction, it's got better range, it's waterproof, it's much, much safer at say 15, 20 miles an hour than a rickety old Xiaomi.
Yeah.
You know, but obviously if the regulations go through as we suspect they're going to, it's going to outlaw anyone on a safer scooter. It's just a bit backwards, you know. Anyway, so this guy's making an important point. All power to his elbow, but unfortunately, he's not looking at a solution. He can't wind back time. There's no point kind of harking back to a golden age where, you know, everybody's on horseback. It's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
You know, e-scooters and micromobility are a reality, and we need to find safe ways for society to slip around each other, and that is get them off the pavements.
Yeah.
Simply put.
I want to start riding a horse to work now.
I mean, just
It can be a frightening prospect, particularly for those vulnerable road users on the road or indeed the pavement, to be terrorized by e-scooter users. But I do not believe that means that we have to not proceed with trials in order to establish exactly what the risks are, and build an evidence basis to how they might be used successfully. I will make note of his comments, and I will make sure that colleagues in the Home Office are aware of the concerns about enforcement of e-scooters on pavements going forward.
Okay.
Lord Snake.
she did make the point on pavements. This is interesting.
I realise you literally sell scooters for a living, so I'm not the least biased person
True.
on this particular issue. But do you think that trialling rental schemes is a fair and effective way of trialling scooters? Do you think the data we're going to get from those trials is going to be a fair representation of e-scooters in general?
Well, I mean, controversially, I can see the arguments to ring fence the trials, you know, using rental schemes. Because the thing about rental schemes is it will give you a good database, because you're, by definition, collecting data on the people riding the scooters. That's part of the rental model. What I think is a shame is they didn't put more emphasis on long-term rental.
Yeah.
Because you could have achieved the same thing by allowing people to rent these by the month. And we put forward a proposal for that. And because we're not a big corporation, you know, with armies of suits who can kind of like put like 1,000-word proposals together, which is, you know, we just couldn't compete with Lime on Uber and Voy, which is a shame. It would have been a bit more interesting if they'd done some kind of like, you know, ground level grassroots thing, and we would all have been totally up for kind of like creating good data sets, because we know it's important.
I think that's where they've really like fallen short here. Is obviously the rental trials are something that's really important to do, but I don't understand why they're collecting data with a kind of rental scheme that is purely sort of tourism based, where you're sort of popping around the city centre, getting around. You need to have trials that are reflective of how people are going to be using these scooters day to day. So yes, there should be long-term rentals across the UK right now, because it just baffles me that the data that they're going to get back is going to be so specific. It doesn't reflect the everyday use of an electric scooter.
Well, okay, so the arguments, you know, for private being allowed in various cities was that people generally look after their own scooter more than they would if it was a rental scooter. People are generally more responsible with their own stuff. That's an obvious point. There was a weak argument about COVID. Oh no, people are going to die of COVID because, you know, that's just okay, fine, but I don't think that was relevant. I mean, I get it, but yeah, I mean, okay, so I went to see a few dealers around the country, and I went to Newcastle. So basically, the kids in Newcastle, the interesting thing, they've got these rental scooters, and they've got lovely helmets attached to the rental scooters. And so the idea is you go and rent it with your phone, you unclip the helmet, off you go, do something responsible, and then no. So all the kids have got, the helmets are flapping around by the stem, they're kind of racing each other through the streets of Newcastle. And you know what, I mean, we all would have done it. It looked like great fun. You know, no one's going to seriously injure themselves at 15 miles an hour, and they haven't. I mean, I think the council kind of put their foot down, and they've basically dropped the speed after 6 p.m. to 9 miles an hour. just to stop the hijinks.
Okay.
You'd be absolutely fuming.
So
Like,
specific.
20 minutes from home.
Yeah.
The clock hit.
But
Yeah, sorry, I need to leave work at 5:30 every day.
oh, okay. So look, anyway, that just puts the problem across. Is that in general, for the first bit, until the novelty wears off, I think a lot of people are just going to sort of ride them around for the crack of it, which is kind of fine. I mean, you get a new bicycle, what are you going to do? You're going to go riding on it, and that's what they're doing on the scooters, and it will calm down. But
Yeah.
I mean.
And also a big thing with the rental scooters is everybody is, or most people that will get on a rental, it usually is their first time on one. People want to give it a go. It's a try before you buy kind of situation with the rental scooters. So inevitably, yes, people probably are going to be having accidents and, not really knowing what they're doing because it's their first time. And I know that a lot of rental trials are introducing kind of schools, like void of a school that you can do, but I mean a lot of people aren't really using them. They're just getting on it and going because they usually want to get somewhere quickly, or they just want to quickly try it out and move on to the next thing, and that's something to remember as well.
And that's okay, and there's all sorts of things that the tech guys can do to manage that situation. So you could basically, if you're a first time user, until you've clocked up a certain amount of hours, they could limit your speed really easily just through the app.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways to mitigate that until the novelty wears off and they're genuinely using it to get around town, just from A to B.
Yeah.
That's quite a good idea.
Thanks. I have an occasion.
You have moments,
Got to level up.
Right. Shall we?
Yeah.
Birmingham is one of the cities selected for the trial of e-scooters. The representatives of the blind and partially sighted community have expressed widespread concern about the number of these wretched things being abandoned in the city centre. As a result of this trial, does the minister anticipate ditching her minister car to use one, and can she see the Piers car park being packed with e-scooters sometime in the future?
Can she just...
I don't see what the issue is with having scooters in the car park instead of cars. Isn't that the whole point?
I think the point he's making is he's poo-pooing the technology. Look, I think with respect to Lord Snape, he probably does enjoy the benefit of a private car or a chauffeur-driven car, and which is, I mean, good for him. Unfortunately, the people that he represents, and working men and women around the UK don't. And the e-scooter and micromobility and lightweight electric vehicles have come along and offered a genuine solution to people trying to get to work, people trying to get around. And these guys haven't got access to, 2 Jaguars or whatever. And so I just find this guy to be disappointingly out of touch. And I'm sure he doesn't mean it, but this is the way he's coming across, and I think this is what's so infuriating to people relying on this technology. And as you said, Jack, people are just voting with their feet. People are doing it anyway. This is not Sinclair C5 or a Segway. Yeah. This is a genuine alternative, a genuine, clean, efficient, cost-effective and fast alternative to get from A to B in a major city like Birmingham, which you purport to represent, by the way, Mr. Snape. So,
It's just, I just find it really demoralising hearing a guy like him speak and just being reminded like how clearly biased and completely out of touch this man who is in a very influential position is. And the only valid thing that he said there was regarding sort of rental scooters being strewn across the pavement and that being an issue for people who are partially sighted. 100% valid.
Yeah, completely.
The same thing happened with line bikes and Uber bikes
Yeah.
when they first came to London. Where I live in Hackney, they just changed it so that there are very specific street corners you're allowed to park them on. Anywhere else, you get a big fine. And people just stopped leaving them across the street. It was fixed overnight.
Yeah, honestly, big fine. It stops people from doing anything of the sort. Exactly.
I don't think anyone in the community is in any way putting an argument forward to say that the partially sighted lobby and the disabilities lobby are wrong to come out and say, look, this behaviour is antisocial. But rather than saying e-scooters are antisocial or the technology is somehow antisocial, we need to focus on the use of the technology. The technology is not going away. It's a fact of life. And it will increase, if we've got any hope of hitting our kind of environmental targets, it has to be, a component of that. So the way to do this is to petition the ride-sharing companies to find solutions for this, and there are solutions for this.
Yeah.
You know, it just needs careful thought. It needs infrastructure. We need simple rules. This is the zone that you can park your e-scooter, maybe at street corners, or we can, you know, convert parking spaces. There's ways to fix this. But we're not going to fix this by fining people out of existence, by impounding e-scooters, by putting points on driving licenses. It's just not the way forward.
And better yet, just make them legal, and then people can take them to the office, take them home, and they won't be on the pavement anyway.
Well, the sooner we stop wasting time issuing fines and confiscating scooters, the sooner we can get on with addressing the actual issues like this. Like, how do we make sure that people leave rental scooters as they found them out of the way? How do we make sure people aren't riding on pavements? Like, these are the things that we could be focusing on if we just got over that initial first hurdle, actually legalising them.
Yeah. People are antisocial. They'll leave wheelie bins in the middle of the street. You know, all sorts of things. You know, dog mess in the middle of the street. You don't ban dogs because a dog takes a dump on a pavement. I mean, it's not the dog's fault.
Love that.
Yeah,
I just
maybe the sound bite of the video.
Yeah, I think end it all right there.
On that note.
Will e-scooters go the same way as the Sinclair C5 or the Segway?
My lords, the government believe that e-scooters, if used in the right way, do have great potential and could encourage modal shift away from the car. That is why we're doing these trials, and I'm really delighted that Birmingham have decided to be forward-thinking, as I would expect it to be.
Ha ha.
And to take up the opportunity for a trial, and there's a lot of things that go into place when a trial is established. There is liaison with the local police, and of course there is careful liaison with the operator.
I'm not this man.
Can I just say, isn't she great?
She's super slick.
Isn't she great? Like, she just really gets those points across, like, really nicely. You know, it must be quite tough taking these comments from the different lords, but to be able to sort of, you know, respond in such a way which is, you know, quite clear and concise, and you can tell she's, you know, she's certainly pro scooter, isn't she? And she's really trying to manage that.
Well, she's pro giving it a proper try.
Yeah.
And that's all that anyone is really asking for.
Yeah.
Because that's all that it will actually take for it to become very obvious that this is better.
Yeah.
That this is the way.
And like she said, that modal shift is, you know, it's crucial. It's what we all need right now. Is just better, more manageable micro-mobility that can help us get around the cities.
So it's disappointing that Lord Snape, a Labour politician, is seen to be so out of touch with the genuine needs of working men and women in the UK, and a weird role reversal that it's the Conservative representative of the Department of Transport who's actually putting a really good argument to benefit the people.
Yeah.
The world's gone crazy.
Yeah.
Game's gone.
Yeah. Let's do it.
My lords, will the noble lady undertake to introduce lessons on the safe use of electric scooters as part of road safety education at schools when the government get to the point of making the decisions on how they should be operated in future? And can she also undertake that charities representing the disabled will be fully consulted before the government makes final decisions?
Can I just first say, wouldn't it be great if you're growing up, you know, you're in primary school and you get a lesson learning how to ride an electric scooter? Like, kids would lap that up.
I was thinking the same thing. I would have loved it if in year 7 in school we'd done some cycle safety.
Did you not?
No.
So when I was a kid, I mean, this is a very long time ago, we had cycling proficiency tests. I mean, it absolutely should be a thing. I mean, we've got there's some organisation, I can't remember which one, a training organisation, which I think has been vouched for by the government or the DFT, and they're knocking together e-scooter sort of CBT, I guess, if you like, or just, you know, I think they do it in phases. There's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. I think it kind of mirrors cycling training. So we've kind of commissioned them to do a bit of a scheme for us. I mean, their obstacle at the moment, again, is regulatory framework for them to do it. But yeah, it's all happening in the background, and we're absolutely up for this. Yeah. Especially kids at school. I mean, my God, like teaching kids a little bit of road awareness is obviously a great thing. You know, let's face it. You know, some life skills at school would have been lovely.
Yeah. Taxes. Can you explain those to me? Because
Bitcoin.
I'll throw it back to cycling, because this whole thing is like almost everything that you say about e-scooters and how they should be ridden, and you know how people should behave on them is relevant to cycling.
Of course.
barely any of my friends, all of whom grew up in London, have their driver's licenses. And when they cycle, it really shows. And I think one of the best cases you can make for getting a driving license in London is that you just learn the ways of the road, and you're a better cyclist, and you're a better e-scooter rider.
Yeah, for
a
sure.
bit of cycling proficiency, a bit of e-scooter proficiency in schools, fantastic idea.
Yeah, just knowing like how to read a road sign, is like knowing to stop at like a zebra crossing. It's all simple stuff which makes such a difference to everyone's safety.
Sure.
Bit of cheeky hazard awareness as well. Took me 3 tries, guys.
Did it?
I'm not very aware of hazards, I'll be honest with you. Yeah.
Bit dopey.
No, apparently so. 2 cars heading towards me, I'm like, this is going to work out. I think that gap's big enough.
Right, let's crack on.
I can certainly guarantee the latter, that we will be consulting with all sorts of people as we make the final decision on the trials, but as I note, the trials are in place. I cannot go into the hypothetical of what might happen if the government do something in the future. However, what I will say is that at the moment, users of the trials do get instruction from the app about the use. There are stickers on the scooters themselves, reminding people stay off the pavements, also about the area in which the scooter can be used. And indeed some operators have advanced training modules and incentives to users in order to complete them.
Yes, the government have provided for a number of e-scooter trials around the country as pilots, as the noble lady of the minister has indicated. What will constitute a positive outcome of an e-scooter pilot exercise, and what will constitute a negative outcome of an e-scooter pilot exercise?
I mean, it's a very good
It
question. Yeah, it is a very good question, and unfortunately, it's a question that I imagine she won't want to answer, because they're going to want as much sort of wiggle room as possible to make a decision. I mean, an obvious answer to the question is it's going to be a lot of public perception, and whether politicians are kind of brave enough to take the brave pill and make the decision. And there's a lot of lobbying to whoop up some bad feeling, to potentially dissuade them from doing so. But I guess obviously it's going to come down to injuries and fatalities, and
that'd be the big one.
That's obviously the big one. And there's, unfortunately, the more people that use scooters, I mean, statistically, if you look at the 100 deaths a year for cyclists, statistically, it's going to happen, and we're going to have to prepare ourselves for that. But you can't just simply blame the technology. You can't ban pedal cycles because there was a tragic, cycling fatality. You have to look at an accident and work out ways to prevent it in future. That's the way it's worked with cars. Trains, planes, every piece of transportation technology.
This is the thing, car accidents are now completely normalised. Like, you don't see them in the newspapers, they're not reported unless it's like a devastating crash. But, one electric scooter crashes into, a van or something, and suddenly it is plastered.
God. Little Timothy broke his toe whilst looking at an e-scooter.
The media love to vilify something that is new and slightly unknown, and it's easier to push it away than to actually accept it and give it a go, and this is what we're seeing here.
Sure. But it's a good question, and potentially the DFT should offer something up, because potentially it should manage people's expectations, because obviously if there is a fatality, you can imagine the red tops are gonna go crazy, absolutely crazy. Beelzebub's chariots killing our young. I mean, my God, it's just going to be headline city as the numbers blow up. Statistically, we have to accept that there are going to be accidents, and there could be a fatality. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately. We're a country of up to 70 million people almost.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Yeah. Anyway.
A very specific question to which I probably cannot provide the answer, because as the noble Lord will know, when it comes to road safety, there is always some very careful benefits and very significant risks to look at together. And as we go through these trials, the evidence will be coming forth, and we will look at that and make the decision accordingly.
I actually want to know, when are they going to be making this decision?
Well, they pushed it back.
They just keep pushing it back, and I just genuinely, I feel like I just want to tear my hair out.
They call it kicking it into the long grass, because for the decision to be made, it's got to be politically viable. I mean, there's no politician alive that is going to make a decision if he or she honestly believes it will get them kicked out of their MPness. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, ultimately MPs have to believe that this is for the public good, and it's not going to end their political career by voting it forward.
I mean, just to sort of add, it's been a year now since the discussion of rental trials has come around, and London is only just getting rental trials now. It's taking too long.
Yeah.
Well, it was, I mean, no one knew. I mean, early days, they were saying, right, the application has to be in now. We've got 30 days, and it was, by August. And so we're frantically kind of like emailing TfL, we're emailing sort of local councils, we're emailing mail. No one knew. So basically, this was a kind of a central initiative, but no one. You spoke to people in TfL, and it was nothing to do with us. No. And all the you approach the various councils, they're like, we're never ever going to have those things here. It was just insane. You couldn't speak to anyone about it. So that's why it's taken so long.
I know. Yeah, and obviously I understand that there are 33 boroughs here in London, and everybody has to make a decision about whether or not they want to be involved with the trials. Hence why it's probably taken so long.
Well, it should have been Sadiq.
A year,
It was Sadiq's remit. It was in Sadiq's gift to push this thing forward. It took him a real long time to do so, and we always suspected that it was partisan. Sadiq didn't want to help, the Tory Department for Transport to actually kind of make a success of something. So he just sort of dragged his heels a bit, I think. That's what it felt like. Anyway, could be wrong. Who knows?
My lord, it's really not surprising that there has been so many serious injuries, because the combined weight of these miscreants with their scooters is over 100 kilos.
And 100 kilos!
And they often break the speed limit of over 40 miles an hour. Will the government encourage local police forces to enforce the law so that injuries and death can be avoided?
Okay, so
let's unpick.
Lay your hair out.
Yeah.
Really give it to him.
So this guy, I think his name is Ian McCall. He's a Baron McCall of Dulwich, I think. He's in his latter years, and he's actually, I think, he's a lifelong campaigner for disabilities' rights. And ultimately, as we've said, he's got a point. Antisocial behaviour is antisocial behaviour, and it needs to be discouraged. However, he has a very flimsy grasp of the facts in play. I mean, obviously, all up weight of 100 kg. Well, I mean, most people are the thick end of 100 kg. I know. I was after my COVID years.
Yeah.
That's such a weird statistic. Like, again.
But look, he's basically saying he's making the point that in terms of physics, there is inertia. If you've got like someone riding a vehicle at 40 miles an hour and they weigh 100 kg, then guess what? It could do some damage to a little old lady if they crash into them.
What about a bike?
What about bikes? What about trucks? What about cars? I mean, it's a bit of a moot point, but ultimately people have got to ride responsibly. They've got to respect the speed limit. They've got to be members of society and not terrorise people.
Yeah.
Calling people trying to get to work the best way they can miscreants is a little bit insulting, and it just unfortunately the picture is another out of touch member of the House of Lords, which could be a little bit unfair when it comes to this guy. I think he's fighting for. I think that a lot of disabilities charities have been knocking on his door and basically saying, look, we're scared, we're terrorised, and these miscreants. And he's fighting their corner, and that's okay. But if he's going to do that, he should maybe spend a little bit more time sort of seeking advice and understanding that the facts at play.
I think we have to remember as well, to back this guy up a little bit. He is, again, with the media, probably reading a lot of news reports of people careering around on motorways. Again, like he says, riding at 40 miles per hour on their own private scooter, going through shopping centres, all that kind of stuff that's been covered in the news. But he's not really looking at the real picture. He's not looking at the everyday person using these scooters to get around and just, use it as a mode of transport, not some, like they say, some terrorising machine.
I know, but all of them. I mean, the last bit of patter. What are the police doing about putting them up on the wall and shooting them in the head? Because it's just a little bit disturbing. It's almost like a kind of a, how can I put it politely, a disdain for working men and women in the UK. It just feels like he's not on their side. And he just effectively wants to put the police in, let's face it, a really difficult position of basically just coming down on law-abiding working men and women, which is what they seem to be doing. I mean, the Met Police are in a terrible position. It's not like they're Mr. and Mrs. Popularity at the moment, and here they are, sort of, dragging working men and women off their scooters.
100%. And for the most part, they're not dragging working men and women off their scooters. Central London is littered with electric scooters, and I've never actually in person seen someone get pulled over and have it taken off. I know it happens from time to time, but the reason it's not is because that's all they'd have time to do all day long, and they wouldn't actually catch any actual criminals because they'd be busy chasing 40-year-old bankers down London Bridge.
Well, there is a campaign at the moment where they're trying to be very, very visibly giving, making lives miserable for people riding scooters. And there's a shot that I saw recently where you've got like 4 officers who I hope are reasonably well paid, with one poor guy and his e-scooter being confiscated. It took 4 of these guys, and it's not a good look. I mean, you try and get somebody out of bed to deal with your burglary or knife crime, and it's like pulling teeth. But there's 4 police officers harassing somebody trying to get to work in the morning. Yeah. It's all about face.
Priorities, eh?
Right, let's finish him off.
I think my noble friend has identified, for your lordship's house, the difference between illegal use of private e-scooters on public roads and the trials, because it is the case that, to date, there have been 2 million journeys on e-scooters within the trials. They've travelled the equivalent distance to the moon 13 times and back again, so that's 5 million kilometres. In all of that time, there have been 0 fatalities, 0 people hospitalised as an inpatient. There have been 11 what you could call serious injuries but not hospitalisation injuries, and 62 slight injuries like a sprained ankle or something. That, from 2 million journeys. The noble lord mentioned they can go up to 40 miles an hour. Again, for a trial e-scooter that is impossible. They are limited to 15.5 miles an hour. So I think it is important that we continue with these trials, we embrace technology, we embrace innovation, we assess the risks and we make the right decision.
So yeah, really, really good point, and great. At the moment she can pull those statistics out, but as I said, I think a little time should be spent managing people's expectations, because as that 2 million trips becomes 10 million trips or even 20 million trips, the odds are that there is going to be a serious injury, just if there were 20 million cycling trips. Someone's going to fall off their bike, someone's going to fall off a scooter. So yes, I think the point should be made is that there's an equivalency. If we think that pedal cycles are the best thing since sliced bread and the artists who all have kind of woes, environmental woes and transport woes, then the same can be said for micromobility. E-bikes, e-scooters, electric unicycles, all these are components in a solution that could solve some pretty big problems that we're all wrestling with. So I think we need to be a bit careful saying that this is risk-free. It's not risk-free. Crossing the road isn't risk-free.
Yeah.
But we've got to take a view, and we've got to think about equivalency here, I think.
It's definitely a statistical inevitability that if these things become totally mainstream, there will be a handful of serious accidents, because of course there will. But those are actually some really encouraging figures that she's got from the initial trials.
Well, figures that we all kind of secretly knew. That ultimately, like there's no particular sort of safety issue with scooters over pedal bikes. Ultimately they're pretty much the same as far as safety goes. There are pluses and minuses for each, but the statistics are going to be similar.
My lords, whilst it's expensive, it's sold without any guidance or rules. I spoke to 10 scooter owners over a few days on my street, of various ages, all male. Not one was aware about restriction on public use, or issued advice on licensing and insurance at the time of purchase. Does noble lady the minister agree, regardless of what she's saying and the assurance she has made, that ambiguities remain about rules of its use? So when can we expect government direction to be made available to all retailers and manufacturers? And is it time for government to consider public information campaigns?
I've got quite a good one here. I mean, you yourself are a retailer. How do you respond to that? Because
okay, well, I mean, every responsible reseller. It's not to say that they're all responsible. I mean, there are some sellers on Alibaba and Amazon that don't make it clear, but everyone with bricks and mortar, everybody with like a reasonable sort of e-com site, make it very, very clear. There are disclaimers on every page to say, look, guys, this is currently in the UK is illegal on pavements and roads. It's really only legal on your own land and off-road use. So this is down to you. Be aware of the facts and ride responsibly. Ultimately, we'll sell them a product. That product can be used legally, or if they choose to, it can be used contrary to current regulations, which a lot of us disagree with anyway. Not to say that we encourage breaking the law, but yeah, we make it very, very clear. In fact, there was an undercover, I think it was Thames TV, did an undercover, I was on television, I had that kind of a greyed out face.
Oh, you had a blurry face.
Yeah.
Oh, that was you, I thought so.
It was me, I know. It's one of my more attractive men. So they came into the shop and right there we basically told them that yes, it's not legal, and they had to kind of say, look, we went into 10 scooter shops and all of them made it clear that it wasn't legal.
And this is the thing as well, because the government is currently saying it's not legal to be riding these, yet they're allowing these huge retailers like Halfords to stock these things. People clearly find it confusing. I mean, I find it confusing because the laws just aren't matching up with what is suitable to sell at the moment. So
also the fact that they're allowing trials to exist where people are obviously riding sort of trial e-scooters and renting them. I mean, the common sense logic is, well, hang on, if it's safe for me to kind of like to pay this corporation vast sums of money to ride around the block, why isn't it safe for me to buy one from Halfords or PET and do the same thing? So I mean, it is muddy at the moment. I mean, fair play. It's like, okay, well, that's just the way it is at the moment with the trials. And as we said before, there are reasons that they're doing the trials this way. But yes, it is confusing. I don't think spending dollars on public information films is really going to do anyone any favours. I think we are on a trajectory towards regulation. I think it's about trying to get the regulations right, rather than sort of like trying to scare the hell people off the roads and into their cars.
Yeah.
But hey,
how do you feel about the motors being limited? Like they've done with e-bikes, if regulation did come through as such.
I hate it.
Okay. Well, look, I technically it's hard to do, because there's no such thing as a 250 watt or a 350 watt motor. If you know about the engineering, it doesn't work like that. It's about how much power the motor controller can draw. It's about the battery. It's about the voltage. It's about the weight of the thing. It's about how heavy you are. It's about power to weight. All of these things are variables and affect the performance of a scooter. I personally feel that what we want is safe scooters on the road and speed limits. That's how we've done it with cars. Why don't we do it with scooters? I think it's maybe some kind of two-tier thing where you can buy a cheap scooter like a Xiaomi or a sort of an E2, and you can ride it at 15 miles an hour. Fine. If you want to go slightly faster, then register it through the DVLA and get decent insurance, and I think that's fair enough. And most enthusiasts who use more powerful scooters would be completely compliant with that. We just need the regulatory framework for that to happen. But yeah, I think, personally, I think 15 miles an hour is too low. I suggest 20 miles an hour because that's the speed of my roads in town.
That's the speed that you feel safe in traffic.
Yeah,
because
of
you're
course.
keeping up. You're not getting blown past by buses every 5 seconds.
Any person doing analysis into accidents knows it's not speed that kills, it's relative speed.
Stopping very quickly.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. So it's one vehicle travelling at 10 miles an hour versus a heavy vehicle travelling at 40 miles an hour. Sure. That kills people. If you've got two vehicles travelling at the same speed, then people have more time. And as long as that speed isn't intrinsically dangerous, so if you've got a scooter that's capable of 20 miles an hour because it's got suspension, it's got decent brakes, it handles great, it's built properly, then that's ultimately going to be safer than sort of sort of dawdling along at 10 miles an hour on some raggedy piece of crap, and someone shooting by at 40 miles an hour in a transit. That's not safe. So I think it needs some thought.
Yeah, it just goes back to the fact, we can buy cars that can go up to 120, 140 miles per hour, yet, with speed limits comes limited speed in certain areas, and that's exactly what we need to be having with these scooters.
I think so, and most people that have been riding a long time have that view. But we understand public perception, we understand that, it might be a difficult pill for people to swallow, and they're going to want sort of limits on speed. I think that's okay, but give people a way to ride, basically stand on electric motorcycles and do it legally and do it responsibly, because otherwise people will do it anyway, and it will just make a mockery of the law and put the police in an impossible position again. Too often, we just rely on the police to kind of make it all better for us, and it's not reality.
I really like that two-tier idea about the 15 or less. Let's call it 20 or less, because that's what it should be. Anyone can have one.
Yeah.
Do a bit of proficiency is recommended.
I think so, yeah.
And
helmets.
If you want the big fast super scooter, then you get your license and registration, ride it on the road at legal speeds, and then take it to tracks on the weekend. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and maybe get the ride sharing guys to, like I said, just limit first time users to a certain level of performance. Don't let someone like a tourist from Latvia just jump on a ride sharing scooter and tear down Oxford Street at 20 miles an hour. No one wants that. So there's ways that the technology can be used to kind of make sure that doesn't happen.
It is the case that the vast majority of retailers do say when one purchases an e-scooter, that they are only for use on private land. I will certainly take the comments of the noble lady back to the department and see what else we can do in that regard.
My lords. Given the dangers to pedestrians, particularly disabled pedestrians, how come there are scooters within a few hundred yards of the Palace of Westminster and elsewhere on the pavement, when it's against the law anywhere to be on the pavement? How come there have been so few prosecutions, and how come you are still allowed to buy and sell these scooters when in the trial areas you have to use only those that are provided by designated renters?
I think we've covered it pretty comprehensively.
Yeah,
Why aren't more people getting arrested for riding them? Well, because the police have more important things to do. What was the other point?
Why are they on the pavements? Because it's actually safer.
I will take the point back to the Home Office about enforcement, about what more we can do, and it is the case that e-scooters should never be on the pavement, as is the case obviously with bicycles for example. But in finishing, I'd just like to say that the OECD's International Transport Forum analyzed various global studies of e-scooter safety, and they concluded that they are broadly equivalent to cycles.
That may or may not
Thank
be
you.
true.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just love you. If I was in her position, my answer to any question, I would just look at my eyes and go, pretend it's a bike.
I think really the solution to this is just put forward an amnesty for riding in cycle infrastructure on minor roads until we sort the regulatory framework out. Just put forward, the police will know where they are with that. They can find people on pavements. If people are riding responsibly, they can just wave them through. It's just that simple, guys.
I love that. Penalise people who are riding irresponsibly, the people who are causing the problems, who are leading the charities to be concerned and worried.
Right.
Absolutely.
Who are the few, by the way?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone gets angrier at seeing people riding irresponsibly than responsible e-scooter riders.
Yeah.
I get furious when I see people acting
absolutely.
illegally on the scooters. I'm like, hey man, I want this to work out. I want this to be legal, and you're ruining it for me.
Yeah, it really is the few that are just kind of ruining it for everyone, essentially.
100%.
Yeah.
I think we probably draw a line under that, because I think
Yeah.
we're pretty much at the end there. Oh God, guys, I feel like I've just had a therapy. Woo! I feel lighter.
Yes, I know, right?
This has been really great to talk to you,
Thanks,
and you are a wise man. You have some very, very good ideas about how this should be happening. Any closing points? Any last things to get off your chest while you're here?
I think the amnesty idea is a strong one, and I think the answer to this isn't basically disagreeing with disability charities, because they've got a valid point. We all agree. What we don't agree with is attacking the technology rather than attacking antisocial behaviour. And I think we need to give the police, especially in London, the tools to do that, and not put them in an impossible position. And I think we'll all sleep better at night, and also be able to get to work on time.
What a dream.
So just to wrap it up, obviously watching through that, we've come to the conclusion now there needs to be law. You're now Prime Minister. What's the law for electric scooters?
Okay, I'd like to decorate my flat first, obviously. Anywho, well, I think the interim position, so until we get to the point that we're ready to pass laws, I think it's correct that we pause for thought rather than rushing into it, but don't criminalise people using e-scooters in the meantime. So I think having an amnesty in the meantime, where if you're riding responsibly on cycle lanes and minor roads under the speed limit, then the police wave you through for now, obeying the highway code and having equivalency with bicycles and e-bikes. I think that would solve a lot of problems. On the flip side of that, if people are riding irresponsibly, like not respecting the highway code, riding on the pavement obviously is a big one, then absolutely on-the-spot fines. And I think everybody would be totally fine with quite heavy on-the-spot fines and confiscating people's hardware as well.
Yeah.
That's totally fair enough. With that, you can encourage people to wear helmets and use lights and be visible, everything else which the police could enforce, and everybody would be behind them. So I think that's the interim position. In terms of what happens with regulatory framework, in the UK, I would suggest 2 stratas. So the first strata would be equivalency with bicycles up to 20 miles an hour. So having a 20 mile an hour speed limit, which is the speed of minor roads in the UK, especially in cities. So you're allowed to ride scooters with a helmet or any micromobility up to 20 miles an hour on minor roads, on cycled infrastructure. Then the second tranche is if you want to ride something quicker, which effectively is an electric motorbike, or other types of vehicles, like some of the stuff that you guys have been knocking around, or faster e-bikes, totally fine. It's actually good for us, it gets people out of their cars and give people a viable way to get around cities and slightly longer distances, and maybe with cargo. But you need insurance for that, you need a plate, you need some way of getting it through the DVLA, which someone's done, by the way, with an e-scooter. And the insurance companies need to be encouraged to provide products that allow people to do that and to get public liability insurance and to do it safely. So that would be it, I think, so effectively a 2-part regulatory framework for sort of lower powered vehicles restricted to 20 miles an hour, and then above that you need some kind of CBT, a license, insurance, and go through the DVLA.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Mark, thank you.
That's
that
okay.
was genuinely insightful and quite cathartic. I feel like I learned, but also I just got a lot of stuff off my chest. And thank you guys very much for watching this. Bit different from our usual sort of video, less sort of falling over and wheeling stuff, more actual
more
talk about regulation. But this is, you can tell how much this matters to us and how strongly we feel about this stuff. And you just listen to one of the most informed people on the planet on this subject wax lyrical about how to do it properly. So Boris, if you're watching, take notes.
And on interior design.
Also.
So everybody, thank you so much for watching. Please do make sure to comment below, because I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of responses to what we've said today and to what these lot have said as well. And make sure to like, subscribe, and keep watching.
Laters.
We're never ever going to have them sing here.
Thank you.